Hey, Wally Adamchik, president of Firestarter Speaking and Consulting, and welcome to Nothing Builds Itself, where today we're getting some more tips from the top contractors to work for in the United States. And today we visit with Sturgeon Electric in Denver, Colorado. Sturgeon is part of MYR Group, one of the largest electrical contractors in the United States. Since 1912, Sturgeon Electric has been providing comprehensive electrical services to clients throughout the Western United States. Their vision is to create connections that empower people. And as you listen, you will see that that starts inside the company. And while Sturgeon may be the largest electrical contractor in the region, that is not what they are most proud of. Being recognized as a top place to work for 9 straight years is a real source of pride and the key to the growth and diversification of the past 20 years. Full disclosure here, Sturgeon is a client of mine. I have spoken at their Foreman Leadership Program, which you will hear a great deal about, and I coach a number of their emerging and key leaders. I caught up with Jeff Waneka to talk about their success. The first thing I noticed is that he was in the office, and after talking about return to work protocols in this COVID era, we talked about his career path. As he shares his story, we see the recurring theme of mentoring, someone taking an interest and helping someone along the way. So are you an electrician by trade? Are you one of those guys? Or
I am not. No, I went to construction management school.
Okay.
Graduated in the 80s. There was nothing going on anywhere in the country, especially in Denver. My father-in-law was an electrician at the time, and he said, man, I'm buried at my job. My project manager's buried. You need to stop by and just see. And the next day, had a job in the electrical trades. Didn't know if it would stick, but it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, it's worked out well for you as the COO of MYR, is it? Or?
Correct. Yeah, we shared COOs. I have a partner who manages the transmission and distribution side of the business. And these days it's pretty equal as far as the revenue that runs through each sides of our business, and interesting to be in that kind of dual role.
So take me back. It's the dark days of the 80s, and you step foot onto job sites, and there's a stereotype about construction today. I was a helper on some of those job sites, in New York City back then. You've come on this journey from a cultural perspective. What were some of the reasons to create this place?
When I first entered the business, I was shocked by how disconnected everything felt. Everything was us versus them. It was management versus the field, the journeyman versus the apprentices. It was just far from what I expected. And I break my career down into 3 phases. That first phase was an observer, just watching the industry, trying to be the best estimator, project engineer, PM I could be. I never had aspirations for being a high-level executive, but I just watched. And my father-in-law was a great mentor, and another gentleman became a great mentor. They were in the last stages of their career, and they just wanted somebody to listen to their frustration because they tried to do so many things during their career and just had it beat out of them. And we weren't getting the best out of them anymore. They were just going through the motions, getting their 8 in. And so I think along the way, I kept going, there's got to be a better way to bring this industry together. So phase 2 was really meeting Rick Schwartz, having Rick with the same vision. He was a field guy. He recognized all the frustrations in the field, and he said, man, we're going to build this thing. We're going to start from ground zero and build a foreman training program, and everything's going to rise with that foreman training program. Phase 3 was just the executive phase that just came through the success of building the organization. Jeff mentioned Rick Schwartz a moment ago. You will also hear the name George Berg a few times in relation to the best practices on job sites and foreman leader training. George is now a retired productivity consultant who clearly made a big impact collaborating with Jeff and Joe, who we'll also learn more about. I can walk into a job site and have an immediate impact on just the attitude, on the production, on so many things. And that's where you get a lot of mattering. And you have to rely on others to do what you used to do. And so you just get really distant from that, and it's clearly less rewarding.
So obviously the values are so much of this. Where did they come from at Sturgeon? How did they get created?
They started, their creation started before I was really in executive management. And so they had been created, but they hadn't been really advertised and pushed out. I was invited to an executive meeting, was one of my first ones, where we really hammered through the values, the mission statement, and the vision. And I really thoroughly enjoyed that session. I felt it was one of our best collaborative efforts. And what I felt like helped me was the catalyst. Now I'm going to take this stuff and we're going to put it out there. We're going to make it part of every training program we've got. Letterheads, brochures, marketing, every proposal. And it finally started to get real traction at that point.
So what were some of the reasons you didn't have traction? I think you use the term assassins.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of people in this company who knew how to make money. I'm not saying it was always the right way, but they had been rewarded handsomely. I would say a lot of them just kind of capped out at their positions. They were okay with that because that's what they were accustomed to. So when they're faced with somebody who's going to come in and disrupt their little hierarchy, they would play along. They had to, but quietly undermining a lot of the things that you're trying to do regarding collaboration, and we are going to work together, and you can't just have your team of A players. We're all A players, right? And we have to form the vision's bigger than your little group. And I know you've done incredibly well, but now we're all going to do incredibly well, right? So some of them went away.
So the values get put out, they're codified, they're in writing. How do you begin to change behavior, though? Everything looks good on paper.
Yeah, I think that, that's that's the training piece, and the recognizing when you step outside of the values to bring the people in and talk through it. Who are we going to be? We can't just put this stuff up and have that behavior going on. I think little by little, they just get traction, and you then really start to find people that come into the training and see it and love it. And, you build around them, and they become the poster children for doing it right. And it's a slow, I used to have a picture on my dry erase board that was a giant ship. Ships turn slow, but you just keep pushing them and they'll get there.
Well, and your ship keeps getting bigger. So how do you keep the special sauce as it just keeps growing?
Yeah, it's probably the biggest challenge that I face. It really is, because there are so many managers in the company now, and they're not all, they don't have my philosophy. They really don't.
You're a union contractor, but talk to me about attracting people. Or you have any trouble? I mean, it's always the issue in construction. So because you're a top place to work, are you more attractive? Is the word out?
Yeah, I think we're super fortunate. In all the legacy locations, we are getting better and better people all the time, both salaried and the union side.
Has there been a safety component to this being a top place to work?
Yeah, I credit a tremendous amount of that. I don't know if you ever met Chuck Soderquist, but an electrician that ended up being a regional safety director. He engaged us with OSHA years ago, and we entered into the voluntary protection program. And we never realized how hard that was going to be. You have to apply for it. You have to spend a week back in Washington describing your whole program. Then they come out and do a week-long tour of your facility, meet your people, go out on job sites and talk with everybody they can find with a Sturgeon hard hat on, with no representation there. And you kind of think you've got it, you've made the bar, but every couple of years they come back and they expect us to be that much better. And that married in really, really nice with the values and the foreman training. And if we hadn't started that 10 years prior, I don't think we'd ever gotten that VPP status.
So you talked about the training, and would you say that you do more training than your competition?
I think we do probably more and probably different. There are a lot of, I just interviewed a guy this morning who came from a competitor, and he said they do a lot of process training. Here's how you do things. And they're probably better at processes than we are. They don't do a lick of leadership, motivation, ethical decision-making, values-based stuff at all. And he's like, even though they're a big competitor with a good reputation, he's sitting there going, wow, I mean, I didn't know you guys did all that stuff. So I think it's different what we do.
But you're like you said, a 9-time recipient here in the Denver market. Is this kind of a yawner now? Is it kind of to be expected? Are people still excited about it when the list comes out?
It's a yawner because we don't put enough emphasis behind it as a whole organization. I mean, you can make it what you want to make it. And I'd love to see on everybody's signature on their email page that, 10 best logo, and, there's 100 different things you can do with it that kind of keeps it alive. So we are our own enemies in making it a bit less emphasis than it should have.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a huge deal. And even if it's not a huge deal, make it a huge deal, right? Turn it into something.
Well, I think it's a huge deal. There's a lot of people who apply that never come close.
I think in early, maybe year 2 or 3, the Denver Post or the Engage group that does this survey gave us some feedback that we were ranked number 9th, not just in the top 100. We were ranked number 9th. And I'm like, and then you look at the companies that are in there, and they're insurance companies and banks, and I would consider them a lot less competitive than a market that we're in. And that's impressive. That blew me away. And to be an old company, a union company, and a public company to boot was, just amazing.
How do you kind of keep the secret sauce going?
Yeah, I think it's just, for me, it's inclusion. Really, it's giving people a voice and ownership of what I read years ago, that most employees believe they have more to give than their employers ask of them. And that was a remarkable, thought, that how many people around here feel like they've got more to give and we're not even drawing them into it. So if you keep that in mind in every meeting and simply just ask, how do you think this would go better? What are your ideas? Pretty soon you're dealing with more ideas than as a manager you really know how to deal with. It can be kind of stressful that you've got people bringing stuff to you. You don't want to say no. You don't want to dampen the fire, but you find a way to listen, do your best to incorporate, give them feedback. I think those are the things that people go home and go, something really cool happened at work today.
Yeah. You're in a growth mode. And you talked about the challenge of dilution. How do you go into a new market and begin to help those new people, those managers that you've acquired, come over to your dark side as opposed to their dark side? How do you culture into those folks?
Yeah. Well, I think that my mission is to share best practices. And although I believe that there are tremendous best practices here, I think every company that we look at, either starting or buying, has their own. And so when we have an annual continuous improvement conference, it's not about Sturgeon, it's about every company we have is going to contribute to this conference. And it starts to just bind people together, right? Mm-hmm. And it's amazing what we've learned from one another. It's amazing things that I think we're here in Denver setting the bar high, and then you got somebody who comes in who's created something that we haven't even thought of. So they immediately feel a part of a bigger mission, a bigger cause, and that's we are changing the industry. It's not just our little group in our little town.
I know the foreman training program has been an important cornerstone for you. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think it's Rick Swartz said it years ago that's where we're going to start. If a foreman is control of his job and feels great about what he's doing and is managing his work well, everybody around that foreman is doing better. And he was exactly right. We started there, helping people feel very in control of their work and their environment, processes, ways to communicate. And that elevated the PMs who work for them, and it elevated the operations managers who work for them. Out of that came other programs, but really that was the basis, and it was how you think, how you communicate, how you see your organization. Little fingers from that have grown in enormous ways, and when we buy a company, that's the very first program we bring to them.
Tell me about a time where one of your, tenured employees didn't play by the values, and you had the conversation, and you had to let them go. Tell me a story.
Most of those happened quite a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a job that Joe Bottaraco was on. He had just came out of the hall and was working as I think maybe a journeyman or a foreman. And a 30-year general foreman was, I don't know if he'd lost his energy or his mojo, but he just wasn't leading the job. And missing in action, doing questionable things. And we sat down and he didn't have an attitude of I'm coachable, I'll get there. It was kind of like, I've been doing this my way and I'm going to continue to do my way. And we said, you're out of here. And that's when Bottaraco stepped in, and the catalyst or the chemistry between Berg and Bottaraco and myself was great. And that job was already probably 20% behind in our labor units. And we did all kinds of very innovative, very fun things with the guys and the crews, and lots of rewards, lots of planning. We ended up making 20% on the job. So a complete turnaround, and that kind of was the launching pad. And it confirmed for me, you can't let somebody stop what really needs to happen for the whole team, no matter how long they've been there.
So was it, so we changed the individual. Did you change processes? Did you change culture on the job? Both?
Absolutely. All of that. Yeah. There were processes we were trying to put in place that person was fighting. Mm-hmm. And the communication was just old school, traditional, kind of do as I say, not as I do. Once that was removed, everyone else could see, hey, these actually are making my life easier. I have access to do my work now instead of dealing with a bunch of stuff in my way. So it took a while to win over a number of people.
As we drew the interview to a close, Jeff reflected with some great candor on the journey of the last 20 years. And then the rest, as they say, is history at that point?
Oh, yeah. I wish. I wish. It's interesting, Wally, to be asked the questions again, and you're prompting a lot of reflection, because you do just kind of forget all the steps that you took along the way and the challenges you pushed through. So no, it wasn't easy. There were times when we shut down foreman training due to a lot of excessive negative feedback from that group, the legacy group. Too soft and fluffy, too touchy-feely.
I recognize at the executive level where you are, this might have a slightly different kind of take for you, but what's left on the list? What's left on the things to do from this culture perspective and this great place to work perspective?
You get isolated the higher you get as well, and intentionally you don't go down 2 or 3 levels to talk with people because you don't necessarily want to disrupt the chain of command or give a different direction. So I'm forcing myself out to do that anyhow, because I get fed, I get energy, I get people going, hey, we got to keep this going. We, you know, what we got is special. Don't let it die.
Jeff's final comment to me spoke volumes and was pretty profound for such a busy person.
You know, you talk about the whirlwind can overcome you, and there's a lot of whirlwind around here. And so we're trying to, what are your really important things to do? Well, what we're doing and what I'm doing with you is really important to me. It brings focus to the stuff that makes the company valuable.
All right, that concludes part 1 of Tips from the Top from Sturgeon Electric based in Denver, Colorado. Let's review some key points. Jeff had a mentor to help him get started. Not the first time we have heard that one. Training of field supervision was an absolute foundation to their success and their growth. And now growth presents challenges of diluting the culture. You heard Jeff mention Joe Bottaraco, and next week we will hear from Joe. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't so you get notified when part 2 comes out. I will see you next time with more tips from the top on Nothing Builds Itself.